I only spent 17 minutes at the lake, just enough time for one punch to unravel an entire family's power structure. He thought he owned the place, but the notebook in my pocket held something no gate could keep out. A deed. Some secrets don't hide in safes. They're filed at the county recorder's office. And that night, I brought the whole county to his front porch. When the new key clicked into place, I understood. Revenge isn't about shouting. It's about signing your name in the right place, on the right day. My name is Nora Caldwell, and I've spent the last 6 months sleeping in my childhood bedroom, staring at the same water stain on the ceiling that looked like a seahorse when I was 12, at 34, after a divorce that left me with more legal knowledge than assets. I'd returned to Grayford, Michigan, to help care for my mother while she recovered from her second cardiac procedure. The house smelled different now. Victor's cologne had seeped into every corner like a territorial marking. My stepfather had married Mom 8 years ago, right after Dad's life insurance check cleared. He'd moved into our Victorian on Maple Street with the confidence of a man who believed everything he touched became his by divine right. "Your mother needs her rest," Victor would say, intercepting me at the kitchen door whenever I tried to bring her afternoon tea. "I handle the household decisions now, including finances." The finances he mentioned weren't just Mom's checking account or the monthly bills. Victor had appointed himself guardian of our family's crown jewel, the lakehouse at Blue Ash Lake, 40 minutes north in Ashbury County. 3 generations of Caldwells had spent summers there, teaching kids to fish off the wooden dock, hosting 4th of July barbecues that drew half the county, watching August meteor showers from the screened porch. In the den, Victor kept a leather portfolio of what he called strategic assets. He'd flip through property assessments and tax documents during his evening bourbon, occasionally calling his golf buddies to discuss maximizing value from waterfront holdings. The lake house had become less a family refuge and more a line item on his personal balance sheet. I worked remotely for Redwood Meridian Capital, a mid-sized financial firm where I'd spent 5 years ensuring our investment strategies didn't run afoul of federal regulations. Compliance work taught you to read between lines, to spot what wasn't being said in documents. It also taught you that the most important papers were often the ones people forgot existed. Mom's health improved slowly. On good days, she'd sit by the window overlooking her garden, now maintained by a service Victor had hired because appearances matter. She'd grown quieter since the marriage, her opinions delivered in careful doses when Victor wasn't around. "The roses need deadheading," she'd mention softly, then add, "But Victor prefers to leave such decisions to the professionals." The lake house came up only in whispers, usually when Victor was at his club. "Do you remember the summer you caught your first base?" Mom asked one afternoon, her fingers tracing the edge of her teacup. "You were so proud. Insisted we take a photo by the boathouse." "I still have that picture," I said. "It's in my old album upstairs." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Victor's been talking about renovations. Says the dock needs modernizing for rental potential." "Rental potential?" "He has plans." She glanced toward the door, a habit she'd developed whenever discussing anything Victor might disapprove of. "The property market is strong," he says. That evening, I found Victor in the den, his leather portfolio spread across Dad's old mahogany desk. He didn't look up when I entered. "Nora," he said my name like it was an invoice number. "I'm reviewing the tax assessments. The lake house carrying costs are substantial." "It's been in our family for 60 years, I said. "Sentiment doesn't pay property taxes." He closed the portfolio with theatrical finality. "Your mother understands. I'm the one ensuring her financial security." The photos on the mantel had been rearranged. Victor's golf tournament trophies now dominated the space where our family pictures once stood. Only one remained, a faded shot of the lake house from the 70s. My grandparents on the dock, the original boathouse in the background. "Is there something you needed?" Victor asked, his tone suggesting the conversation was over. "Just wanted to check on Mom. She's resting. Doctor's orders." He stood, using his height advantage like a gavel. "I'll let her know you asked after her." That night, I lay in bed studying the seahorse stain, thinking about property taxes and carrying costs, and the way Victor had said financial security like it was a weapon. Through the thin walls, I could hear him on the phone, his voice carrying the particular enthusiasm he reserved for discussions of money. "Prime waterfront," he was saying. "Once we handle some paperwork details, the potential is enormous." The seahorse on my ceiling seemed to swim in the darkness, and I remembered what compliance work had taught me. The most dangerous threats were the ones that came wrapped in legal language and careful documentation. Victor might control the household, but somewhere in the maze of county records and filing systems, there were always papers that told the real story. I just had to find them. The morning I discovered the truth, Mom had asked me to find her reading glasses in the upstairs study, a room Victor rarely entered because it held too much old clutter. Between searching cushions and checking drawers, I knocked over a stack of manila folders she'd been organizing, papers scattered across the Persian rug, and as I knelt to collect them, 3 words stopped me cold. Cypress Key Holdings. The document was dated 2 years ago, crisp with legal formality, a living trust, executed by Lorraine Caldwell, transferring ownership of the property at 4782 Lakeshore Drive, Blue Ash Lake, to Cypress Key Holdings LLC, the LLC's registered agent, Nora Caldwell. The member interest, 100% owned by Nora Caldwell. My hands shook as I read further. Mom had included a letter, folded inside the trust document. "My dearest Nora, if you're reading this, then you found what I couldn't bring myself to tell you directly. The lakehouse is yours. It always was meant to be. I've seen how Victor catalogs our assets, and I couldn't bear to watch him sell our memories for profit. The transfer was recorded at the Ashbury County Recorder's Office on March 15th. The LLC is properly registered. I've been paying the taxes and insurance through a separate account Victor doesn't know about. When I'm stronger, we'll discuss this properly. Until then, please keep this between us. All my love, Mom." I photocopied everything using the old printer in the study, then carefully replaced the originals. The copy went into my laptop bag, wrapped in a compliance report from work. That evening, I opened a secure browser and accessed the Ashbury County Property Records database. Sure enough, there it was. Deed transfer recorded. Cypress Key Holdings LLC listed as the current owner. The beautiful simplicity of it made me want to laugh. Mom had outmaneuvered Victor using his own tools, legal structures and proper documentation. Over the next weeks, I quietly took over the administrative duties. The property tax bills came to a P.O. box I'd established in Grayford. The insurance premiums were on autopay from an account I'd opened for Cypress Key Holdings. The peer association fees, the seasonal maintenance contracts, all of it flowed through the LLC's books, which I maintained with the same precision I applied to federal compliance reports. Victor never suspected. Why would he? In his mind, real estate was men's business. He kept his photocopies of old documents in that leather portfolio, occasionally brandishing them during his phone calls about investment potential. But photocopies of superseded deeds meant nothing against properly recorded transfers. Mom grew stronger through the fall. Sometimes, when Victor was out, she'd catch my eye with a knowing look. "The autumn colors must be beautiful at the lake," she'd say carefully. "I'm sure they are," I'd respond, equally careful. Victor mentioned driving up there next weekend. Something about meeting a contractor. "That's interesting," I'd say, my voice neutral while my mind raced through the implications. The genius of Mom's plan revealed itself in layers. By transferring the property to an LLC I controlled, she'd created a clean break in ownership. Even if Victor had some claim through marriage, it wouldn't touch an asset that had been legally transferred before he could assert any interest. The timing was crucial. She'd done it during a brief hospitalization 2 years ago, when Victor had been distracted by what he thought was his opportunity to take control. I studied the trust documents like scripture, memorizing every clause. The LLC operating agreement was airtight, drafted by Mom's old attorney who'd retired to Florida right after completing the work. No loose ends, no room for challenges, just clean, precise legal architecture protecting what 3 generations had built. At work, I processed investment compliance reviews while secretly reviewing Michigan property law. The monitor displayed federal regulations, but my mind was on riparian rights and LLC governance. My colleagues at Redwood Meridian thought I was becoming even more detail-oriented. They had no idea I was preparing for a different kind of compliance action entirely. The lakehouse sat 40 minutes north, waiting. I hadn't driven up there yet. Too risky with Victor monitoring Mom's activities and, by extension, mine. But I pulled up satellite images on my phone late at night, zooming in on the dock where I'd caught that first base, the screened porch where we'd watched meteor showers, the boathouse Victor wanted to modernize for rental potential. He had no idea he was planning renovations on someone else's property. The thought should have made me feel guilty, but all I felt was the cold satisfaction of seeing a compliance violation about to be corrected. Victor had operated outside the bounds of legitimate authority. Soon, he'd learn what happened when the paperwork didn't support your claims. The silver LLC seal on the Cypress Key Holdings documents caught the light from my desk lamp. It was a small thing, that seal, but it represented something larger, the power of proper documentation, of thinking ahead, of protecting what mattered. Mom had given me more than a lake house. She'd given me the tools to defend it. The Saturday afternoon in October started like any other. Victor had left for his golf game. Mom was napping, and I'd told her I was running errands. The drive to Blue Ash Lake took exactly 43 minutes. I'd timed it during my college years, racing sunset to catch the golden hour on the water. I parked at the public boat launch down the road, not wanting my car seen at the property yet. The walk to the lake house felt like traveling through time. Each step brought back memories. Learning to ride my bike on this gravel road, picking blackberries from the bushes that still grew wild along the fence line. The lake house stood unchanged, its cedar siding weathered to silver-gray perfection, but the new lock on the gate made my stomach twist. Victor had already started marking his territory. I used the side path, the one hidden by overgrown forsythia that only family would know about. I needed just a few minutes to inspect the property before winter. The roof had lost some shingles in the September storms. The gutters were clogged with maple leaves. The dock looked stable, but I could see water damage on the boathouse siding. All things that a responsible property owner would document for maintenance and insurance purposes. I was photographing the damaged boathouse siding when I heard the car. Victor's Lexus pulled into the drive, blocking my exit path. He emerged slowly, deliberately, his golf attire incongruous against the rustic setting. His face was darker than I'd ever seen it. "What the hell are you doing here?" His voice carried across the yard. "Checking the property," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The storms last month." "This is private property," he advanced toward me, his hands clenching. "My property. Actually. Get out." He was close now, close enough that I could smell the bourbon from his golf game lunch. "You have no right to be here." "I have every right." The first thing he grabbed was my phone, yanking it from my hand and throwing it against the boathouse wall. I heard the crack of the screen. Then his hand was on my shoulder, spinning me around, and I was off balance, stumbling backward. "You think you can sneak around behind my back?" His fist connected with my ribs, a short, sharp punch that drove the air from my lungs. I doubled over, gasping, and he shoved me. I went down hard on the gravel path, my palms scraping against the stones. "Victor," I tried to speak, but he was already walking away. "You're trespassing," he called back. "If I see you here again, it'll be worse." I lay on the gravel for a moment, processing what had just happened. My ribs throbbed, my palms bled, but my mind was crystal clear. Victor had just made a crucial error. He'd turned a property dispute into assault. I drove straight to the Ashbury County Sheriff's Office, gravel still embedded in my palms. The deputy who took my statement was thorough, photographing my injuries, documenting the broken phone, taking down every detail. The medical examiner at the county hospital diagnosed bruised ribs and mild concussion symptoms from when I'd hit the ground. "Do you want to press charges?" the deputy asked. "Yes," I said without hesitation, "and I need to file for a temporary restraining order." The Turo was granted that evening by an emergency judge. Victor Hale was ordered to stay 500 feet away from me and to have no contact, direct or indirect. The criminal assault charge would follow its own timeline, but the immediate protection was in place. I drove back to Grayford in the dark, my high beams cutting through patches of fog. My ribs ached with each breath, but I felt strangely calm. Victor had escalated this beyond property disputes and family dynamics. He'd made it a legal matter, and legal matters were my specialty. Mom was awake when I got home, sitting in her chair by the window. She took one look at my face and knew. "Oh, Nora," she said softly. "I'm okay," I told her, showing her the TRO paperwork. "And I'm done being careful." That night, I sat at my laptop and began building my case with the methodical precision of a compliance officer. The assault report, the medical records, the photographs of my injuries, the broken phone that had recorded the entire encounter until Victor destroyed it. Thankfully, everything had already uploaded to the cloud. But most importantly, I pulled out the Cypress Key Holdings documents. Victor thought he'd scared me away from the lakehouse. He thought violence would succeed where his financial maneuvering had failed. He was about to learn that some battles weren't won with fists or intimidation. They were won with properly filed paperwork and the full weight of the law. The bruises would fade, the scraped palms would heal, but the legal machinery I was about to set in motion would be permanent. Victor had given me something more valuable than he knew, a clear-cut case of assault that would make every subsequent legal action unassailable. I saved all the files to multiple secure locations and closed my laptop. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows. At the lakehouse, that same wind would be stirring the water, creating the small waves that lapped against our dock through the night. Our dock, not his, never his. The 17 minutes I'd spent at the property had changed everything. Victor just didn't know it yet. The bruises had faded to yellow-green by the time I walked into the Ashbury County Recorder's office. The clerk, a woman named Dolores, who'd probably seen every property dispute in 40 years, pulled the files without question. The chain of title for 4782 Lakeshore Drive read like a family history. Caldwell to Caldwell to Caldwell, then to Cypress Key Holdings, LLC. "Need certified copies?" Dolores asked. "3 sets, please," I said, "and the transfer tax records, if you have them." Back in my home office, I spread the documents across my desk like a general planning a campaign. The compliance skills that made me valuable to Redwood Meridian were about to be deployed for a different purpose. Victor had shown his hand with violence. Now I'd show mine with something far more devastating: bureaucratic precision. First, the property tax records revealed something interesting. Victor had been claiming homestead exemption on the Grayford house while also trying to rent out the lakehouse, a violation that could trigger penalties and back taxes. I photographed every relevant document. Next, I drove back to Blue Ash Lake, this time with a contractor friend who owed me a favor. We stayed on the public easement, but modern telephoto lenses are remarkable tools. The illegal electrical work on the dock jumped out immediately. Underwater lights installed without permits. Wiring that violated every marine safety code in Michigan. "That's a fire waiting to happen," my friend muttered, snapping photos. Or worse, electrocution. The township's online permit database showed no applications for dock modifications, none for electrical work, nothing for the boat lift Victor had installed last summer. Each violation came with fines, stop work orders, and potential criminal liability if someone got hurt. But the real gold came from an unexpected source: the Blue Ash Lake Association newsletter. In the summer issue, buried in the community notes, was a small item. Reminder: short-term rentals under 30 days are prohibited by township ordinance and association bylaws. Violations may result in fines up to $500 per day. A quick search of vacation rental sites found the lake house listed on 3 platforms. Victor's Lakeside Retreat, the listings called it, available for weekend rentals, Friday to Sunday, $350 per night. The reviews went back 6 months, at $500 per day in fines. Victor had accumulated potential penalties exceeding $90,000. I called the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality next. The old pump house that Victor had been using to drain the hot tub directly into the lake? That was a violation of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. The helpful officer I spoke with seemed very interested in investigating. My phone, the new one, since Victor had destroyed the old, buzzed with an email from my attorney. She'd found more violations. Victor had been writing off lakehouse expenses on his taxes while claiming it as a personal residence to get better insurance rates. Insurance fraud was a felony in Michigan. That evening, Mom and I sat in her room, away from Victor's usual haunts in the house. I showed her the growing file. "You've been thorough," she said quietly. "I learned from the best," I replied. "You didn't just give me the lake house. You gave me time to prepare." She squeezed my hand. I knew he'd eventually show his true nature. I just hoped. She trailed off, then strengthened. "Well, hopes aren't plans, and you've certainly planned." The assault case was moving through the system. Victor had hired an attorney who'd tried to plead it down, but the prosecutor wasn't interested in deals. The photos of my injuries, combined with the destroyed phone and the medical reports, made for a solid case. But I wasn't relying on just the criminal charges. Every agency I'd contacted was beginning their own investigations. The township building inspector had already issued a stop work order on the dock. The DQ had scheduled a site visit. The tax assessor was reviewing 7 years of returns. Victor didn't know it yet, but he was surrounded. Each violation created its own legal pressure point. The genius of Mom's trust wasn't just that it protected the property. It made me the legal owner who could file complaints about unauthorized use and modifications. I compiled everything into a master spreadsheet, the kind I'd create for a complex compliance audit, columns for violations, agencies involved, potential penalties, documentation status. The numbers were staggering, between fines, back taxes, and potential criminal charges. Victor faced financial ruin. The Turo remained in effect, keeping him away from me, but I could feel his rage from across town. He'd tried calling Mom, but she'd simply handed the phone to her nurse and claimed she was too tired to talk. He'd sent letters through his attorney, each one more desperate than the last, offering to resolve this misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding. He'd hit me. He'd stolen from my family. He'd violated dozens of laws in his greed to monetize what wasn't his. And now, like any good compliance officer, I was going to ensure every violation was properly documented, reported, and prosecuted. The lake house sat empty now. The illegal rentals canceled after the township's cease and desist order. Soon, it would be Thanksgiving. Victor had mentioned plans for a fundraiser there. Before all this started, he'd already sent out invitations. I'd heard through the country club gossip network. I smiled, thinking about those invitations. Victor was about to learn what happened when you built your house on someone else's foundation. The paperwork was clear. The violations were documented. The agencies were mobilized. All that remained was the execution. The country club gossip network proved more efficient than any social media platform. Within days, everyone knew about Victor's planned Thanksgiving weekend fundraiser for the yacht club at his lake house. The printed invitations, on heavy cream cardstock, promised an elegant evening of cocktails, dinner, and dancing to benefit the Blue Ash Marina renovation project. $150 a plate. Mom's friend Margaret told us during a visit. Victor's been bragging about raising $20,000 in one night. He's even hired that band from Detroit, the one that played the governor's inaugural. I listened carefully, taking mental notes. Victor had invested heavily in this event. Deposits for catering, entertainment, rentals. The social capital he'd spent was even greater. This fundraiser was his statement to Grayford society. Victor Hale was a man of substance, a waterfront property owner, a benefactor of worthy causes. My attorney, Sandra Reeves, laid out our options with surgical precision. "We can file for an emergency order of possession before the event," she said. "With the deed, the LLC documents, and his current violations, no judge will deny it." "What about enforcement?" I asked. The sheriff's office will accompany us. Given the TRO and the assault charges, they're taking this seriously." She paused. "He won't be able to claim ignorance or delay, not with guests arriving." We scheduled everything for the day of the fundraiser. The legal machinery moved with beautiful efficiency. The court order recognizing Cypress Key Holdings' rightful possession was signed by Judge Martinez on Tuesday. The sheriff's office scheduled their enforcement detail for Saturday afternoon, precisely when the caterers would be setting up. I hired a locksmith from Traverse City, someone with no connection to Grayford's social circles. A notary public agreed to accompany us to witness the formal transfer of possession. The building inspector from Ashbury County was more than happy to conduct his site visit during such a convenient window. "I'll need to check those dock violations thoroughly," he said over the phone, barely concealing his satisfaction. "Especially with a large event planned. Public safety concerns." The insurance company proved equally cooperative once I provided documentation of Victor's fraudulent applications. "The policy is void if the named insured isn't the legal owner," the adjuster confirmed. "We'll be sending formal notice of cancellation." Friday night, I couldn't sleep, not from nerves, but from the strange calm that comes with perfect preparation. Every document was in order. Every authority was aligned. Every legal requirement had been met. The trap wasn't just set. It was built from titanium cable and constitutional law. Saturday dawned clear and cold, the kind of November day that made the lake shimmer like hammered steel. I dressed carefully, professional blazer, pressed slacks, the kind of outfit I'd wear to a federal audit. This was business, not personal. The bruises Victor had given me were hidden, but the legal bruises I was about to inflict would be permanent. Sandra met me at the Grayford courthouse at noon. The sheriff's deputies were professional, almost bored. Property disputes were routine for them. The locksmith followed in his van. The notary, a retired teacher named Mrs. Chen, rode with Sandra. "Big party at the lake today," one deputy mentioned as we formed our convoy. "Heard half the country club's going." "Yes," I said simply. "They are." The drive to Blue Ash Lake took the same 43 minutes it always had, but this time, I wasn't sneaking down side paths or hiding my car. This time, I was arriving as what I'd always been, the legal owner. We could hear the activity before we saw it. Catering trucks lined the drive. Workers unloaded tables, chairs, warming stations. A tent company was erecting a massive white pavilion on the lawn. The band's equipment truck was backing toward the boathouse. And there, directing traffic like an admiral at Fleet Week, stood Victor in a navy blazer and yacht club tie. He saw our convoy of official vehicles, sheriff's cars with lights flashing, Sandra's BMW, the locksmith's van, and his face went through a spectacular range of emotions: confusion, anger, fear, understanding. "What the hell is this?" he shouted as we emerged from our vehicles. Deputy Morrison, the lead officer, stepped forward with practiced calm. "Mr. Hale, we're here to enforce a court order. This property is legally possessed by Cypress Key Holdings, LLC. You're required to vacate immediately." "This is my property," Victor's voice cracked. Catering staff stopped to stare. Early arriving guests in cocktail attire clustered near the tent, phones already out. Sandra handed him the paperwork with elaborate courtesy. "The deed transfer to Cypress Key Holdings was recorded 2 years ago. You've been trespassing and conducting illegal rentals on property you don't own." The building inspector chose that moment to emerge from his truck, clipboard in hand. "I'll also need to shut down this event. Multiple code violations, no permits for the tent. The electrical work's dangerous. And is that a warming station near the boathouse? Fire hazard." Victor's carefully constructed world began collapsing in real time. Guests were arriving to find sheriff's deputies and code enforcement officers instead of cocktails and canapes. The band members stood frozen, instruments half unloaded, watching the scene unfold. "You can't do this," Victor said, but his voice had lost its authority. "Actually," I said, speaking for the first time, maintaining perfect professional calm, "I can, and I am." The locksmith was already at work, power tools whirring as he removed Victor's locks. The beautiful mechanical sound of tumblers falling into place had never sounded so sweet. Each new lock bore a small engraved plate, property of C.K.H. The notary documented everything with methodical precision. The sheriff's deputies maintained order as more guests arrived to find their evening's entertainment had become an entirely different kind of show. The Grayford social scene would be dining out on this story for years. The lakefront had transformed into a theater of Victor's humiliation. Guests continued arriving in their evening finery: judges, bank presidents, yacht club board members, only to find sheriff's vehicles blocking the drive and their host in heated discussion with law enforcement. "This is a misunderstanding," Victor kept insisting, his voice carrying across the water. "I've paid for everything. The tent, the catering, the band." "On property you don't own," Deputy Morrison stated flatly. "Ma'am, would you like these people removed?" I stood by the newly installed gate lock, watching Victor's carefully orchestrated world crumble. "The caterers and service people can retrieve their equipment. The guests need to leave." Behind Victor, the white party tent stood half-erected like a collapsed soufflé. The band had stopped unloading entirely, their leader already on the phone with someone, likely their attorney, given the circumstances. The catering manager was frantically directing his staff to reload the trucks. Judge Patricia Winters, one of Grayford's most influential residents, approached in a stunning cocktail dress. "Victor, what on earth is happening?" Before he could spin a story, Sandra stepped forward. "Judge Winters, Mr. Hale has been illegally occupying and renting property owned by my client, Cypress Key Holdings, LLC. We're enforcing a rightful possession order." The judge's eyebrows rose. She'd seen Sandra in her courtroom many times. "I see. And the assault charges I've been hearing about?" "A separate matter currently in the criminal system," Sandra replied smoothly. The social mathematics were swift and brutal. Judge Winters stepped away from Victor as if he were contagious. Others followed suit. The crowd that had come to celebrate now witnessing a very different event. The building inspector was making a show of photographing violations, his bright yellow vest a beacon of official authority. "This electrical work on the dock," he called out loudly. "Completely illegal. Could have killed someone. I'm issuing a stop work order and recommending criminal charges for endangerment." The DEQ officer had arrived, taking water samples near the pump house. "Unpermitted discharge into the lake," she announced to anyone within earshot. "That's a federal violation. EPA will want to investigate." Victor's face had progressed from red to purple to an alarming shade of gray. His yacht club commodore, Richard Pemberton, approached cautiously. "Victor, perhaps we should reschedule the fundraiser." "There is no fundraiser!" Victor exploded. "This is theft. This is—" "Mr. Hale," Deputy Morrison interrupted, "you're violating a restraining order by being within 500 feet of Ms. Caldwell. You need to leave immediately or I'll arrest you." The crowd gasped. Restraining order, assault charges, property theft, insurance fraud. The whispers were already starting. In a town like Grayford, reputation was currency, and Victor had just declared bankruptcy. "You have 10 minutes to gather any personal belongings from the house," I said, maintaining the same professional tone I used for compliance violations. "Deputy Morrison will accompany you. Nothing else is to be removed." Victor looked around wildly, searching for support. His golf buddies avoided eye contact. The yacht club board members were already walking back to their cars. Margaret, Mom's friend who told us about the fundraiser, actually smiled and gave me a small nod of approval. "The association violation fines," I continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. $90,000 for illegal short-term rentals, the insurance fraud investigation, the tax evasion charges for claiming conflicting statuses. Your attorney will be hearing from mine about settling these matters. Sandra produced more documents. "We're also seeking restitution for 2 years of unauthorized use and damage to the property. Our preliminary estimate exceeds $200,000. 200, Victor choked on the number. "The illegal modifications alone caused significant damage," Sandra explained clinically. "Removing unpermitted structures, restoring the property to code, environmental remediation for the pump house violations. The locksmith had finished his work. The new locks gleamed in the afternoon sun, each one a small declaration of ownership. He handed me the keys with ceremony, 3 sets, brass and silver, on a ring marked with the Cypress Key Holdings logo I'd designed. The notary public, who'd been documenting everything with quiet efficiency, spoke up. "I'll need you to sign acknowledging the change of locks and transfer of possession. Mr. Hale." "I'm not signing anything," Victor snarled. "Then I'll note your refusal," she replied calmly, making her notation. "The legal transfer stands regardless." The caterers had finished loading. The tent company was efficiently dismantling what they'd erected. The band's truck pulled away, leaving tire tracks in the gravel. One by one, the witnesses to Victor's empire dispersed, each carrying a piece of the story that would dominate Grayford gossip for months. Finally, only the official vehicles remained. Victor emerged from the house with a single box, Deputy Morrison at his shoulder. His yacht club tie was askew, his blazer rumpled. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of his exposed schemes. "Your car is outside the property line," Deputy Morrison informed him. "You'll need to leave now. Any attempt to return will result in arrest." Victor looked at me one last time, his eyes promising retribution. But we both knew the truth. He had nothing left to fight with. Every avenue of attack had been blocked by proper documentation, legal filings, and his own criminal behavior. As his Lexus disappeared down Lakeshore Drive, I stood on the porch of my family's lakehouse, keys in hand. The water was calm, reflecting the late afternoon sun. A great blue heron fished from the dock, our dock, legally and irrevocably. "That was quite a performance," Sandra said, joining me. "Just compliance work," I replied, "making sure everything is properly documented and enforced." The sheriff's vehicles departed. The inspector left his violation notices posted prominently. The DEQ officer promised her report within the week. Soon, only Sandra and I remained, standing in the sudden quiet. The silence lasted exactly 90 seconds before Sandra's phone buzzed. Victor's attorney. "Put him on speaker," I said. The voice of Martin Crawley, Grayford's most expensive legal counsel, filled the air. "Ms. Reeves, this is highly irregular. My client has substantial investments in this property." "Your client has been criminally trespassing," Sandra interrupted. "We're prepared to file civil suits for 2 years of unauthorized use, damage to property, and fraudulent enrichment from illegal rentals." "Perhaps we could discuss a settlement," Crawley said quickly, too quickly. Sandra smiled at me. "We're listening." "My client would be willing to reconcile certain matters in exchange for dropping the civil claims." "Be specific," Sandra commanded. There was muffled conversation on the other end. Then Victor's voice, rough with barely controlled rage. "What do you want?" "Restitution for the assault," I said clearly. $50,000, full payment of all township fines for illegal rentals, restoration costs for removing your unpermitted modifications, and a signed statement acknowledging you have no claim to this property." "That's extortion." "That's settlement negotiation," Sandra corrected. "The alternative is criminal prosecution for assault, insurance fraud, tax evasion, and environmental violations. Your choice." More muffled conversation. Crawley came back on. "We need time to consider." "You have until 5 o'clock, Sandra said. "After that, we file everything Monday morning. Criminal referrals to the DA, civil suits for damages, reports to the Insurance Fraud Division, and a formal complaint to the IRS about those creative tax filings." She hung up before they could respond. The locksmith had left an invoice on the porch table, $400 for emergency weekend service. I wrote the check from the Cypress Key Holdings account, noting it as property security upgrade in the ledger. Every detail mattered now. At 4:47, Crawley called back. "We'll take the deal, but we need the agreement in writing." "I'm drafting it now," Sandra said, her laptop already open on the porch table. "Mr. Hale can sign at my office. He is not to return to this property." "Understood. By sunset, It was done. Victor signed the settlement agreement in Sandra's conference room, his signature shaky with suppressed fury. The check for restitution was certified, drawn on his personal account. The statement acknowledging no claim to the lakehouse was notarized by Sandra's assistant. "The township fines?" Sandra prompted. "Monday morning," Crawley promised. "All 90,000. And the restoration costs?" "Another check, this one for 30,000. This should cover the dock work and pump house remediation." Victor hadn't looked at me once during the signing. He stared at the conference table as if it might open up and swallow him. When everything was complete, he stood to leave. "Victor," I said quietly. He paused at the door but didn't turn. "Mom's house in Grayford. You'll be moving out by the end of the month." Now he turned, his face twisted. "You can't. The assault restraining order makes it impossible for you to live in the same house as Mom while I'm caring for her," I explained calmly. "And I'm not leaving. She needs me." Crawley put a hand on Victor's arm. "We should go." They left in silence. Sandra and I sat in her conference room as the lights of Grayford began twinkling outside the windows. "Clean work," she said finally. "Every angle covered." "I learned from the best," I replied, thinking of Mom's careful planning 2 years ago. She knew this day would come. Back at the lakehouse that evening, I walked through each room with reverent attention. The kitchen where Grandma had taught me to make pie crust. The living room where Dad had read stories by the fireplace. The screened porch where 3 generations had watched summer storms roll across Blue Ash Lake. I called Mom from the landline, the same number our family had maintained for 40 years. "It's done," I said when she answered. "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice was stronger than it had been in months. "Your father would be so proud. You protected what he loved most." "What we all loved most," I corrected, "is Victor Ver. His attorney is finding him a furnished apartment. He'll be gone before Thanksgiving." She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry it came to this. When I married him, I thought—" "You thought he was someone else," I finished gently. "We all did. Will you stay at the lake tonight?" I looked out at the water, now silver black in the moonlight. "Yes, someone needs to make sure everything's secure." "Of course, very responsible of you, Ms. Compliance Officer." We both laughed, the first real laugh we'd shared in months. Later, I sat on the dock with a cup of tea, listening to the water lap against the pilings. The illegal underwater lights were dark. I'd already disconnected them at the breaker. Tomorrow, I'd call contractors about proper restoration. The dock would be rebuilt to code. The pump house would be properly decommissioned. The property would be returned to what it had always been, a family sanctuary. My phone showed 17 missed calls from various Grayford numbers. The gossip mill was in overdrive, but I felt no need to feed it. The story would tell itself through official channels, police reports, court records, township minutes. Victor's carefully constructed image would unravel thread by thread, all through properly documented facts. The brass key to the new lock was warm in my hand. Such a small thing to represent such a complete victory. But that's how the best compliance work operated. Not through dramatic gestures, but through careful documentation, patient preparation, and flawless execution. Somewhere in Grayford, Victor was learning what it meant to lose everything he'd thought he'd stolen. And at the lakehouse, 3 generations of Caldwells rested easy, knowing their legacy was finally, legally, safe. The morning sun painted the lake in shades of copper and gold. I stood on the newly secured porch, watching a family of ducks paddle past the dock. The locksmith's work from yesterday caught the light. 3 new deadbolts, each bearing the small Cypress Key Holdings emblem. My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. "Township fines paid in full. Crawley just delivered certified check. Environmental inspection scheduled for Thursday." I smiled, adding another checkmark to my mental list. Victor's empire had crumbled in less than 24 hours, brought down not by anger or revenge, but by methodical application of the law. The contractors I'd called were already scheduled. Next week, they'd begin removing Victor's illegal modifications. the underwater lights that could have electrocuted swimmers, the improperly installed boat lift, the pump house that had been poisoning the lake. The property would be restored to what my grandparents had built: simple, safe, and in harmony with the water. A car pulled into the drive. Mom emerged slowly, helped by her home health aide. She'd insisted on coming to see the lakehouse properly returned to the family. "Oh, Nora," she breathed, taking in the peaceful scene. No party tents, no catering trucks, no men in yacht club ties planning to monetize our memories. Just the lake, the house, and the November sky. We sat on the porch while the aide made tea in the kitchen. Our kitchen, with its ancient percolator and mismatched mugs collected over decades. "I should have been stronger," Mom said quietly. "Should have stood up to him sooner." "You were exactly as strong as you needed to be," I replied. "You protected this place when it mattered most. The trust you set up 2 years ago made everything possible." She smiled, her face lighter than I'd seen it in years. "Your father always said you got the family's business sense. He'd have loved seeing you use it like this." "All those summers here," I mused, "learning to fish, watching storms, making s'mores on the beach. Victor saw dollar signs. We saw life. And now it's preserved for the next generation," Mom said. "When you have children, they'll learn to fish off the same dock," I finished. "Legally permitted and properly constructed, of course." We both laughed. The aide brought out tea and Mom's morning medications. As she sorted pills into their compartments, I noticed the small changes already taking place. Mom's hands were steadier. Her voice had lost its cautious tone. Even her posture seemed straighter, as if Victor's absence had removed a physical weight. "He'll be gone from the house by Wednesday," I informed her. "The restraining order makes it legally impossible for him to stay." "And after that?" "After that, we heal, both of us. The house in Grayford, this place. They're ours again. No more looking over our shoulders." A text from Crawley appeared. "Client has secured apartment. Movers scheduled for Tuesday. Requests permission to retrieve golf clubs from garage." I showed it to Mom, who actually giggled. "His precious clubs, tell him yes, but only with police supervision." The sun climbed higher, warming the porch. The lake was glass smooth, broken only by the occasional jumping fish. This was what Victor had never understood. The value wasn't in rental income or property assessments. It was in these moments of perfect peace, earned through generations of careful stewardship. I thought about the 17 minutes that had started everything. Such a small window of time for Victor to destroy himself. One punch thrown in anger, and he'd given me all the ammunition needed to dismantle his carefully constructed theft. The bruises had faded, but the legal consequences would follow him forever. My phone rang, a Grayford number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Caldwell, this is Patricia Winters. The judge from yesterday's debacle. I wanted to apologize for my association with yesterday's event," she continued. "Had I known the true situation." "No apology necessary, Judge Winters. Well, I also wanted you to know that Victor's membership at the yacht club is under review. Assault charges and property fraud don't align with our values." After she hung up, I realized the final phase of Victor's fall had begun. The social exile would be complete within weeks. In a town like Grayford, reputation was everything, and his was now worthless. I spent the rest of the morning doing simple tasks, sweeping the porch, checking the furnace, making lists of needed repairs. Each small act was a reclamation, a statement of ownership that no legal document could fully capture. As I prepared to leave, I stopped at the front door. The new keys were heavy in my hand, substantial and real. I locked each deadbolt carefully, listening to the satisfying click of tumblers falling into place. On the lawn, I posted the new sign I'd had made. Private property. Cypress Key Holdings LLC. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. It wasn't elegant or subtle, but then again, neither was justice. Sometimes, the clearest message was the simplest one. This is mine. You are not welcome here. The law stands behind me. The drive back to Grayford took exactly 43 minutes. as it always had. But this time, I wasn't leaving our lake house in enemy hands. I was returning from a successful compliance action, one that had restored proper ownership and ended years of theft. Victor thought he'd won with a punch. Instead, he'd learned what every good compliance officer knows. The pen isn't just mightier than the sword, it's more precise, more permanent, and perfectly legal. The lake house stood ready for its next chapter, protected by new locks, clear ownership, and the full weight of the law. The 17 minutes were over. The lifetime that followed had just begun. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story of justice served cold resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments.